Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
All right, you can grab a seat. Good morning. My name is Tim. I want to say welcome to you this morning. Welcome to be at Hillcrest. I want to invite you to open up in your Bibles to James chapter 3. Just what Penny read is what we're going to be looking at together this morning. And excuse me while I just kind of get myself situated up here. It always takes me a minute. My lamp. Anybody else bring a lamp? I didn't think so. All right. So, let's see here. We are continuing our series on the book of James, this letter that Jesus' brother wrote today. And I want to begin by having us exercise our historical imagination. So picture in your mind's eye, I want you to picture ancient Jerusalem, this compact city, stone buildings kind of on top of one another, a city. There's no centralized planning, so winding stone streets. I want to picture James, Jesus' brother, in the late 40s AD. It's evening time, him walking through the streets of ancient Jerusalem. Maybe there's some energy, some anxiety in his body. He's walking quickly, and he's on his way to a gathering. It's this something that later on we've called a council meeting, but it's actually this gathering of all the key leaders in the early church. And James, he's carrying some worry and concern as he heads to this gathering. He knows the future of this kingdom movement, this future of this movement that his brother founded, it kind of hangs in the balance on where this gathering heads. There's been pressure on the outside of Jesus' kingdom community. In fact, several other leaders have been killed. Stephen and James, the son of Zebedee, earlier on, they were killed. And during that persecution, many of the followers of Jesus actually scattered out, left Jerusalem. They kind of scattered to surrounding regions to find safer places to live. But now, in addition to the outside pressure, now there's like this inside pressure. There's this conflict brewing within the community himself. That what's happened is, as the good news of Jesus has spread, people have taken it as they've gone on. They've visited relatives and gone on business trips, and they've told other people, like, this is what God's heart looks like. The Messiah has come. He has given his life for us. He is the real king. And people have begun to trust in this. Not just other Jewish men and women, but non-Jews, Gentiles, people from totally pagan backgrounds. In cities like Antioch, they've begun to say, this is true. I want this Jesus to be my king as well. But what has happened, it's created this tension. Because, of course, Jesus was a Jew, and he's teaching out of the Hebrew, the Jewish scriptures, and this tension has developed where a lot of these Jewish followers of Jesus have said, hey, for these people to really join Jesus' movement, they need to become culturally Jewish and follow the Jewish codes as well. And other people have said, no, Jesus accepts them right as they are. And so there's this tension in the movement. What these non-Jewish, these Gentiles, as they join, will they be allowed in? What will be asked of them? How's this going to work? And James, he's headed to this gathering where this is going to be talked about. And he's wondering, like, is this whole thing going to blow apart? Like a relational conflict? Is the whole thing going to spin apart? Or are we going to be able together, are we going to be able to find a truth together, find out what Jesus' heart is together, and move into this, like, are we going to be able to see Jesus' kingdom movement explode out and invite all kinds of people in? And James knows these leaders are gathering, and because he's not like he's in charge of the Jesus movement, but because he's Jesus' biological brother, eyes are going to be on him. What he says, how he handles himself, how he treats people. I mean, how the Jesus movement handles tension and conflict for years to come the trajectory will be set by this gathering. And he's got anxiety. And he's headed not knowing what's going to happen. It's the streets of Jerusalem moment in James's life. Tension and conflict. And I just wonder, is there anything about what James was experiencing in that moment. This weight, this concern, this possibility of conflict, but hope for a common future, for stronger relationships. Is there anything about that you say, oh, I've felt that before? What is your streets of Jerusalem moment? When's the time that you've experienced some of those things? And we should, now maybe your first thought is, Tim, I have never been in charge of the future of the Jesus. Okay, I get that. But let's think of, anybody the last couple years, have you had conflictual, tense conversations with people you care about? Two of us. Maybe, let's get together. We'll have a chat after service, right? Let's be honest. Whether it's with family, like working, and obviously we know the big conversations of race and pandemic and politics, but there's all sorts of other stuff too, not little, but just not headline type stuff. But there's places where, whether it's with family or workplaces or with housemates or in your small group, places where it's like, oh, you're walking into a conversation, you're thinking about a conversation, you're like, man, this could go one of two ways. I really hope we hear each other. There's a deeper trust and intimacy that comes out of this, but this could go in a way where we just don't talk much after this. We don't see each other much after this. The streets of Jerusalem moments in our lives. And what I want to talk about today is that James, this brother of Jesus who's headed to this gathering, this letter that we've been looking at, we call the book of James, really the letter written by James. It's written most likely a couple years before this gathering. And in it, he talks about communities in tension, in conflict. And in the section that we're going to talk about today, he talks about what does wisdom that builds bridges and makes peace look like. And so I want to look at what James said about these situations, to know the man and to know how he thinks, the one who was going into that gathering so many years ago. So let's look at it together. James chapter 3 is where we're going to be. If you haven't flipped there yet, James is where to the right in your Bible. It's after Hebrews. It's before 1 Peter. And he talks about wisdom, and really the background is wisdom when relationships are in tension, and how to handle these things. So let's listen to what James has to say. Verse 13, he starts off and he asks this question. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" So he's not asking for hands. So wise people, please rise. The rest of you, yes. No, that's not what. It's a rhetorical. Essentially, James is saying, "Hey, I want to talk about what makes a wise person. How do you tell if you're operating in real wisdom? How do you tell if somebody else is operating in real wisdom? In other words, what is real wisdom?" And remember, this is that James is talking to people who are really having to live this out in difficult situations. I just said this a moment ago. That he's writing to those, he's writing to those folks who had fled Jerusalem and the surrounding regions because of the persecution. Because people's lives have been lost, these folks, followers of Jesus, had left. And now they had moved, they're setting up new lives, new jobs, new neighborhoods, reforming Jesus communities. There's real conflict, real stress, and he's trying to speak into their lives. Hey, let's talk about how you live in real wisdom when the folks that you're living life with, they themselves are under pressure. How do you do this together when it's easy to bump into one another? What does real wisdom look like? And I want to say this. When we talk about this, I think there's a danger in a passage like this that it kind of spins out into vagueness. That maybe we read a passage and what kind of lands in our ears is, wisdom is a wise person saying wise things wisely. And it can kind of just spin out to, yeah, that's so deep. And kind of this spiritual vagueness. I just want to ground us again. Remember, this is a leader who is living this out with real people in real relationships, and he's really practiced this. So I want us to try and listen for how James sees the rubber hit the road, because that is what he's pushing towards. Don't let our minds and hearts kind of stay, at the 30,000-foot level. So this is what he says. He says, what is real wisdom? And then the second half of verse 13, he says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So the first thing that I want us to notice is just the same point, that real wisdom shows up in what we do. In other words, biblically, whenever we talk about real wisdom, there's just kind of this baseline idea that real wisdom is what we might call skill in living. The real wisdom is never just skill in thinking. Real wisdom shows up skill in living, skill in relating to people, skill in navigating conflict, skill in building understanding, skill in gathering people together for a common task, skill in mending hurts, skill in living. And so he says, hey, it shows up in how we live. Real wisdom is skill in living. And then what he's going to do, the next thing, the rest of the passage, he's going to do this. James is going to say, and there's two different ways this skill can go. He's going to say there's counterfeit wisdom and there's real wisdom. You might have skill at just getting your own way. That's counterfeit wisdom. That's not real wisdom. I want to talk about skill in pursuing the ends that Jesus desires. Skill in pursuing God's heart. That is real wisdom. So it's skill in living, but it's pointed in a certain direction. And so let's look at these two. First, he starts with counterfeit wisdom, counterfeit skill in living. And he describes it. He says, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom, quote unquote, does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. So when he's going to contrast counterfeit wisdom and real, genuine wisdom. And he's going to, for each one, he's going to say there's a difference in where they begin, their source. He's going to say there's a difference in how they operate. He's going to say there's a difference in where they end up. Counterfeit wisdom, genuine wisdom. So counterfeit wisdom, he just described it here. He says counterfeit wisdom, the source is us. It's natural, it's earthy, it's even demonic. It's just our own wants, our own desires, what we want here and now. This is where counterfeit wisdom begins. Me. He says there's going to be a difference in how it operates. It operates around the goals of selfish ambition, bitter envy, getting my own way. And where it ends up, he says it's going to end up in disorder and every evil practice. When you have a lot of people doing this together, it's chaos. It's not a good situation. Most of the dramatic TV shows we love are a cast of characters with tremendous skill in getting whatever they want and manipulating those around them to get what they want. Right? It's entertaining because it's chaos. It's disorder. It's Machiavellian. He says this is counterfeit wisdom. You can watch some great episodes of Survivor. Counterfeit wisdom. And the reality is, it's not just, when we talk about counterfeit wisdom, it's not like it's not just like some people use counterfeit wisdom and some people use genuine wisdom. We all use counterfeit wisdom at times. And I think James is guiding us to help identify the times and places when we are using counterfeit wisdom, and to more often set that down so that we would operate and use genuine wisdom, genuine skill living. What are the things, how can you personally tell? What helps you tell when you're using counterfeit wisdom? For me, I just, this picture of being in the shower, rehearsing wonderful arguments that I could unleash against the person that I am upset with. I know that I am operating in counterfeit wisdom. When I'm driving down the road, going over past hurts, all the reasons that they owe me, that I am the righteous person in this relationship, And they are the ones that are fully in the wrong, that I know I am operating in counterfeit wisdom. When it's like when there's anger or hurt, and I'm not just like genuine being authentic about it, but I'm kind of feeding it like a fire. I'm just throwing more wood into, trying to stoke it because there's something good about that kind of anger or upsetness. I know I'm working in counterfeit wisdom. How can you tell? For you personally, what is it for you? I mean, we're each wired a little bit different. What is it for you that those are things that are like, oh, I am using my skill right now not to pursue what I want? What helps you tell that? Anxiety. Yeah, the anxiety is the thing driving you. Yeah. Tension. Yeah. Closed heart. Yeah, there's a hard-heartedness that can develop in us. What, on the other hand, what helps us to live in genuine wisdom? I think about myself. I can tell when I'm in genuine wisdom when I am asking questions of myself like, I wonder what they've been going through that led up to this conversation. What's going on in their life outside of this kind of conversation we had? I wonder what kind of tension, or wonder what they're bringing to this conversation. I wonder what God's heart, like what God desires to happen out of this meeting or this relationship or this guy. I wonder what God desires to have happen out of this. When I find for myself, when I take a step back, and I'm less concerned about just kind of nursing my own stuff, but trying to see it through their eyes or through God's eyes, that I'm operating more in genuine wisdom. And James here, he's just honest. He said, hey, there's these two kinds of wisdom: counterfeit wisdom, genuine wisdom. He describes counterfeit wisdom, and then he goes on to describe genuine wisdom. I want to look at that with you now. Genuine wisdom, very different than counterfeit. Starts in a different place, operates a different way, ends up in a different conclusion. He says in verse 17, he says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So, for genuine wisdom, James says it comes down from heaven. It doesn't begin with us. And it operates, and he's got this long list of characteristics about how it operates: impartial, sincere, considerate, merciful, and peace-loving, peacemaking. And where it ends up, it makes peace and reaps a harvest of righteousness. I think whenever I hear righteousness, think right relatedness between people, right relatedness between people and God. It begins in a different place, operates a different way, ends up in a different conclusion. And I think the beginning for me is key. It comes down from heaven, which means genuine wisdom, it's a gift from God, but it's just frankly, it's centered on God. It begins not with my list of what I want. It begins with Jesus. What do you want in this friendship? Jesus, what do you want? Jesus, what do you want from my parents? Jesus, what are you hoping for my kids in this situation? Jesus, what are you hoping for in this marriage? Jesus, what do you want? What do you want? What are you dreaming for my spouse? Jesus, for this group of people that I'm leading, for each one of them, Jesus, what are you up to in their lives that I could encourage? It comes from heaven. It's centered on God and God's heart for the situation. And then it operates, obviously, through mercy, and then it ends up in making peace. I kind of summarize this section just in a sentence. Real wisdom starts with what Jesus wants and humbly creates peace. And this is not rocket science. I think we all know these two things, these two postures, that we know how they feel. They feel differently. We've all experienced these. I think about I was trying to think of I should say it this way. I wasn't trying to think of an example when I lived in Counterfeit Wisdom. I was trying to narrow it down to one example when I lived in Counterfeit Wisdom. And I thought of the lamp argument. So early on in my marriage with Christy, this is just like, we've been married maybe 2 years at the time. We were going to bed one night, and she had gone to bed before me, and I think she was reading. Her lamp by her side of the bed was on, and then she decided to go to sleep, and so she just, put the book down and was falling asleep. And then I came into the bedroom, and then I got in bed, and then I was like, hey, babe, can you turn off the lamp? And then she said, well, you're the last one in bed. You should turn off the lamp. And I think we all know it's the person's side of the bed, whatever side you're on, bears final responsibility for the lamp. This idea, last one in bed, bears responsibility. So we had a discussion about the lamp. This young married couple, had a little chat about it. I deployed my skill in stubbornness towards my desired end. And just so you know, we did sleep with the lamp on that night. Demonstrating our combined maturity in our young relationship. But there's a heart posture. Like, is this about me? Or is this about, just what's best for us? What's what God desires, where you're coming from? Or is it just, I'm going to get my way? I want to kind of demonstrate this with a picture. Can I have a couple come up here? I just need one couple who would volunteer just to stand up here with me. I see a few of us out in the room. People are about to pop up. All right, the Sellecks, I love it. Come on up, give them a hand. Will you stand right here, down by my lamp?
Will we regret this?
You won't regret it. So I don't know if everybody knows you. You want to tell them your names?
I'm Ben Selleck.
Oh, do we have green on? There you go.
I'm Ben Selleck.
There you go.
Camille. Sorry.
Camille. Now, Ben and Camille, has anything like this ever happened in your relationship?
Not today.
Not today. Fantastic. You want to kind of tell us about how the last week? No, I'm teasing you. Yeah. All right. So when we're operating in counterfeit wisdom, this is my experience. Ben, I want you to stand here and face the lamp this way. And then Camille, I want you to stand here and face the lamp this way. Right. Maybe you can each kind of grab the lamp. There you go. In my experience, when I am operating out of counterfeit wisdom, and it is about what I want, the posture is kind of this coming at the other person. Like it's kind of implicitly conflictual. It's kind of what I want versus what you want. I'm pulling my way, you're pulling your way. And really at the only day, only one of us is going to win. I am deploying my skill in argumentation and my skill in stubbornness to get my way. I think when we move to genuine wisdom, there's a picture, a difference. You two, you actually are tugging a war on this right now. You can't help yourself. There's a change in posture. I want you both to rotate 90 degrees and come shoulder to shoulder beside each other. I think there is an implicit change. There is a difference that can happen when it ceases to be I'm going to get my way, you're trying to get your way, we're against each other. And and I've talked to couples about this, and obviously this is in no way reserved just for married couples. This plays out in all kinds of relationships. I'm just using this because this is the lamp example. But there's a difference when it's like, hey, we are on a team here. We have a situation in front of us. I know we both see it differently, but at the end of the day, like we are in a relationship. Like we both want it to work out. We don't want to spend the next 24 hours in a conflict because of a dumb lamp. Can we, as a team, figure out a way to work this out? And there's this shift, a 90-degree turn that happens when we go from counterfeit wisdom to genuine wisdom. When it ceases to be me versus you to us in this together. We're going to work through this. And this, James, let me be honest with you, and James is honest about this. This 90-degree turn is one of the hardest turns you'll ever have to make. James gets that this is not easy. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to turn and the other person doesn't want to turn, or the group of people don't want to turn. Sometimes it feels like you making this turn is like killing part of yourself. Because, amen, preach. Because there might be this hurt or this anger or this list that you've got in the back of your head. And if you're going to make this 90 turn and say, Jesus, what you want is the most important thing here, it means you're going to have to take that, you're going to have to put it down in the grave and leave it there. Ben and Camille, thank you. Give them a hand. Yeah. But what I have found is that there's something, for being a follower of Jesus, it doesn't mean there's some like, hey, you're a follower of Jesus and it means this always goes smooth or always goes right or something like that. But I do believe that when you're a follower of Jesus, you find inner resources to make this 90-degree turn that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Because the whole story of Jesus is the story of my king, my rabbi, my teacher, the one I follow, is one who made this turn on my behalf. In the book of Ephesians, it says Jesus is our peace. Jesus, in his natural self, he did not say, hey, I want to be brutally tortured and publicly humiliated and take the pain of the sin on myself because it sounds fun. But he said, I will lay down, Abba, I'm going to lay down what I want, but Abba, what you want. Because he says, because my higher goal, my bigger heart is that people would be reconciled with me. And I choose to lay that down. I take that pain upon myself. I turn this way. I open myself up to the world that anybody who would trust me, they could be forgiven. They could be reconciled. They could have peace made between them and my Abba Father. And so this turn that often feels like death, we do it with our King who has gone through death for us. And we're able to say, Jesus, I can't do this on my own. Give me strength. Will you help me in this? And we can move from counterfeit wisdom to genuine wisdom. So, I think that the takeaway is pretty simple for us. Where do you need to bring peacemaking wisdom this week? In the relationship, in your kind of relational world, the places you exert leadership, the people you do regular life with, the people you live with, where do you need to bring peacemaking, genuine peacemaking wisdom this week? And let me emphasize, this matters. This matters a whole lot. Wisdom is one of those words. I said at the beginning, it can feel kind of like this vaguely spiritual word. Friends, this kind of peacemaking wisdom, if you ever sat with a kid whose parents were not able to reconcile and the thing just spun out into a ugly divorce, you recognize like genuine peacemaking wisdom versus counterfeit wisdom, like it matters. There can be collateral damage. You've ever been part of a church that blew apart and you've seen long-time relationships end. You know, like genuine peacemaking wisdom matters. There can be costs when groups of people just follow counterfeit wisdom. If you've ever been in a family situation where once it was fun, like holidays laughing together, and then it moved into a period of Cold War where phone calls just don't happen anymore, you understand like genuine reconciling, peacemaking wisdom, like it matters in our lives. And it doesn't mean that when we pursue this, everything always works out hunky-dory, but it does, like as far as we are responsible, we are personally called to pursue peace as much as we are able. We get that there's other people and they have their own responsibility, but we are called to pursue peacemaking wisdom as much as we are able to do it. I just know when I think about our church community, like I just see the way that this is not like a once a week show. We are a fabric of 1,000 little relationships that happen all the time on Tuesday nights after small group or Wednesday text messages or Friday mornings around coffee. Like that, we are a fabric of community, and we have the opportunity to, day after day and week after week to pursue peacemaking, genuine wisdom in these things, or to pursue counterfeit wisdom. And what we do, how we interact with one another, reverberates out through the rest of the community. And I am so thankful. I've been here, 10, 12 years now, and I am just grateful for Hillcresters who have pursued genuine wisdom, who haven't and I don't mean avoiding conflict, but I mean courageous conversations, seeking Jesus' heart, even when it's difficult, speaking love and speaking truth. I am grateful because every one of those is what strengthens the fabric of a community. My hope is that we would be a community together, committed to that in all the unseen ways that may be unseen to the rest of us, but I promise when those relationships are thriving, it will not be unfelt. Our lives are connected. May we pursue genuine wisdom together. I just want to end with this picture. James, we started with him in Jerusalem. He's headed to that meeting. He ends up going into the meeting, and they have this tense conversation. A number of the leaders share their heart on seeing these non-Jews enter the Jesus movement. Others were opposing it. James, he doesn't start talking right away. He listens. And then it kind of comes to be his turn to share. He begins by summarizing what he's heard. He doesn't attack anyone. And then he speaks about what he sees is the truth of where Jesus wanted his movement to go. And he speaks about what he sees Scripture saying about this. And he says, hey, friends, I believe these non-Jewish brothers and sisters, they're not meant to become culturally Jewish to join the movement. God accepts them just as they are. And then he doesn't issue a decree, but together, the entire leadership movement, they agree on this, and they write a letter to the non-Jewish churches throughout the region, but particularly the one that we hear about in this book is Antioch. And then they send this letter with some messengers to these Gentiles in Antioch, these followers of Jesus. And in chapter 15, verse 30, we get to hear the fruit of this peacemaking work of James. He's not there, but this is the fruit of it. And it says in chapter 15, verse 30, so the men were sent off and went down to Antioch, where they gathered the church together and delivered the letter. And the people read it and were glad for its encouraging message. Judas and Silas, who themselves were prophets, said much to encourage and strengthen the believers. And after spending some time there, they were sent off by the believers with the blessing of peace to return to those who had sent them. And the story ends with these non-Jewish followers of Jesus sending peace back to the leaders in Jerusalem. And what could have splintered and spun apart the other church becomes a moment of strengthening and encouraging and binding them together. And so, Hillcrest, may we know it's worth it. May we know that in all these ways it matters to lay down counterfeit wisdom and pursue genuine wisdom. May we find our hearts centered on what Jesus wants. May we find ourselves operating out of mercy and consideration for the other. And may we find it building peace and right relatedness in all the relationships we're involved in. Let's pray. Jesus, we are grateful to you. We are grateful to you that you are our peace. Jesus, you embody these very virtues that James, your brother, write about. You are full of mercy. You are the peace lover. You are the peacemaker. You are pure. You are considerate. You are submissive. And Jesus, I just pray in the real, tangible things, the relationships that are coming to our minds this week, Jesus, would you show up? Would you encourage us? Would you show up practically? Guide us in what it means. What do we need to say this week? Questions do we need to ask? How do we need to listen? That we could embody your peacemaking wisdom in our lives.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.